Hello, denizens of the Tabletop Club. I am your treasurer, Ryan, and I'm going to be showing you all how to use the not as complicated as you might think world of Roll20 today. First and foremost, we're going to be starting with this left-hand bar covering each one of these things and their functions. We are also going to be covering the various tabs up here, the art library, the journal, the compendium, the jukebox, the collection, and my settings. We will also be covering using the page toolbar and how to move maps around. And towards the end of this video, we will also show you some unique tools and easy tricks for making your Roll20 session all the more authentic. So beginning, we have the cursor section, where you have the ability to select and move tokens and movable objects. And you also have the ability to pan your view, and you can do this either by selecting it, or you may do this by right-clicking, which is easily the best of the options. Next up is the layer section, and this is what is most useful for a DM. In Roll20, there are 3 different layers. There's the map and background, there's the objects and tokens, and then there's the GM info overlay. The difference with these sections is about what the players who you are DMing for can see. Things which are on the map and background layer will typically include the map, which is visible but not movable to the players, as well as any necessary stationary objects. The objects and tokens, that is where you will put your characters. These will be objects which you can move around, and will also be movable objects, or anything else along those lines that your DM, or you yourself might choose to have be movable by the players. The last is the GM overlay. The GM overlay is a special tool for DMs, which allows you to basically place tokens which only you yourself can see. While you're on this GM layer, you may move things around which your players, even if you are in plain view of them, will not be able to see. This is very useful for sort of dropping things in or hiding things in plain sight, or even just keeping reminders for yourself, such as this fine hooded gentleman here, who any other player might not be able to see. Now, something important that you should realize about your tokens is that by clicking on them while you're on the layer they are set to, you may right-click on them. By doing such, you see that there is a layer tool, and this allows you to change their layer on the spot to the layer they are on, which will be highlighted in blue, to the layer that you want them to be on, such as back in the token layer. So now this not-so-fine fellow is visible once again. Moving on from this, one of the more useful, or for some players, more creative tools is the drawing shape tool, which is typically divided up into the drawing of shapes, which really just allows for you to draw squares. You may use freehand, which allows you to draw sort of any kind of thing that you can direct. You may also use polygon line, which is perhaps the most difficult tool to learn how to use, but also the most beneficial. In order to use this tool, you may click on a point, you may drag your mouse, and the polygon line tool will create a line between those 2 points. And you may continue doing this at various places until you have created a full shape of your own sort of custom design. Finally, there is the text, which allows you to type in any one of these fonts at any one of these sizes in any one of these colors. Now, a pro tip that people might not realize is that on the lower part of the screen, next to your name, there will be colors. These colors will typically act as presets for you. For example, my color right now is black, ergo the color of the text I would type is black. If I were to change my color to, say, green, and sort of refresh my view of things, I would discover that I could change my view to be the same color and change my design. So I could type in anything, such as hello. Not very visible, but it's there. Additionally, and this is more of a pro tip for GMs, if you were to use this and place it on the DM layer, you could keep your notes on the map without your players being able to see it or read it. This could be useful for remembering a locked door, a hidden trap, a hidden treasure, or perhaps a location of an enemy. The next tool we're going to be covering is the sort of magnification tool. This is sort of it's a useful tool that allows you to change the sort of zoom in, which is also controlled via this bar over here. For example, right now I am at 50%. If I were to zoom out, I would go further and further away until I'd be at the edge of the map, or I might zoom in by pressing this button, and it'll zoom me in by approximately 10%. Moving on from this, we have the snap tool. This is most useful as a ruler to measure movement for players, as well as sort of relative distances. By clicking on a point, you see where that measurement is, and you may begin to drag it elsewhere and show you how far you can move. In other situations, you may want to use the no snapping ruler, which just tells you approximately how far things away without having to rely on the grid. A more sort of specified tool, but one that is useful nonetheless. Additionally, when you are using this tool, you may drag it out, and when you right click, you create a point, at which point you may continue moving your ruler, and the point you previously measured, for example, the 14 feet, remains labeled. Next up is the tool that is most used by DMs, the Fog of War tool. First and foremost, you can click the Hide Areas option. This will allow you to activate and enable Fog of War on a map. What Fog of War does is it creates an area of darkness that the players cannot see through or into. This means that you are able to hide secrets that maybe they cannot see. However, for every map, once you decide to hide an area, it will give you the option to hide the entirety of the map. Next, you will probably want to learn about the Reveal Areas tool. This is the most basic use of this tool, which allows you to create a sort of area of visibility for the players. You may do this to, illuminate the indoors of an area, or in fact, to just control sort of line of sight. The last of these tools is the Polygon Reveal, which is similar to the polygon line drawing in that you would click on an area, such as this, you create a line to this area, and then you'd have to keep moving it in such a way that eventually the last line connects with your original point, at which point that entire area or shape will be revealed. Now, from our current viewer, Patrick, would you have any questions about what you've seen so far?
I do have one about the layers section, since I'm sure a lot of people
Yes.
will have a question about that. More specifically, the different GM overlays in terms of this one
Oh,
for the objects and
for the opacity?
I'm sorry, did you say something, Brent? Oh, never mind. Um, Specifically, yes, for the overlay area, probably the objects and tokens is the one that's a bit confusing. In terms of how you would add these different tokens in and how
I
you'd be
see.
able to draw them into the area.
In that case, the best sort of examples I can start to give you is that for the objects and token layer, you would want to go into your images, which we will cover more later, or go into your journals. And you would click on something which you want to drag in. For example, let's say we want to drag in the player lorelei. In order to drag in the player lorelei on the objects and token layer, we'd ensure that we were on the objects and token layer first, and then drag the person out. If we wanted for lorelei to be on the GM and info overlay area, we would move to this layer. We'd make sure that it was selected in blue, and then we would drag it out again. This indicates that she is now on the overlay instead of in the area. And if we wanted to move them onto the map or background, we would simply do the same thing again. However, the background or map area would oftentimes need to be resized since it will come out bigger than you are perhaps ready for.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Once
And
again, I should add that you can change the layer they are currently on by right-clicking on them, by selecting your layer, and selecting whichever layer you wanted them to be on. The one that is already highlighted will be the layer they are currently on, whereas the other two will be the layers you can move them to.
awesome. And also about the color changing. You did talk about how to change it in the tool when you were talking about drawing and shape tools. Uh,
Yes,
you did change your actual player color. If you could just go into how you did that again.
of course. So when you look at your player icon, you'll see that you have a token thing which you can select for yourself, such as the images of Palpatine, Rockdom, Brant, and my own sort of random red pattern. If you look underneath your names, you will see that we all have our Roll20 labels. However, next to those is a square that has a sort of color within it. If you wanted to rearrange and reorganize your default color, you would click on that, which would then bring up a sort of hexadecimal label for colors. And you could change it from the current color that is on to a different color.
Perfect.
This would mean that your default color for the selecting would change to the color that your sort of avatar's color was selected to. For example, mine just changed to pink instead of green, which it was previously.
Perfect. I think that would be all in terms of questions. I don't see anything else that was maybe a bit ambiguous, other than perhaps just to cover the fog of war tool again.
Of course. So
Uh,
the fog of war tool, it allows you to hide areas. For example, once you have all areas hidden, which you would do by sort of selecting this, dark cloud option, you would then want to use either the reveal areas tool, which would make things visible to the players. For example, if they were to be on this map, they would only be able to see the areas which are now brightened by comparison. Additionally, you may use the polygon and reveal tool to make a more customizable shape, which they would be able to see. And let's say you make a mistake and you want to rehide an area, you'd select the hide areas option again, and you'd be able to drag and rehide an area by dimming it.
Perfect. That was something I was gonna get into or ask you. Was hiding just specific areas?
Yes, if you do hold shift while selecting, you can snap to the grid. Thank you, Brant.
I think
Now,
that's all the maybe misinformation or ambiguousness out of the way in terms of what you've done so far.
all right. The next we will move on to the initiative tracker, which is, from first glance, a very difficult beast to handle. So once you see that you have this, you see that your turn order exists. There aren't currently any tokens that are selected. What this means is that you may want to click on the token that you want to join the initiative. You would right click on it, and you go to the very top of it and click the Add Turn button. From there, you could insert any sort of number they rolled for initiative. Let's say they rolled a 12, or let's say they roll, or a 22, I suppose, since Roll20 is pulling a few games. And let's say this person rolled a 23. Now, naturally, Joe Schmo rolled higher than this other person, which is why you would want to click on the gear, and it would allow you to set the number options by your numbers or by your sort of alphabet. Now, because this is the initiative tracker, you really want to set it by your numbers, and you want to set it in sort of descending order. So that way the person who rolled the highest is on top, and the person who's on the bottom rolls on the bottom. Now, using this sort of green highlight is a very good basis to remember whose turn you're currently on. And as a pro tip for any GM, you are the one who controls who is selected and when. So, for example, let's say Joe Schmo. Let's say that this lady's turn has just completed, and it is now Joe Schmo's turn. You would then click on this arrow, and it would cycle to show that Joe Schmo is next. This would allow for the player to have obvious knowledge that this character is next. Additionally, a helpful tool for making sure you don't lose any tokens is to know that if you hover over the number, you will see that the token that the initiative belongs to is then circled in yellow. For example, let's say that you're a DM who's running a group of monsters. One of the most important things you could do, let's say Jensen is a monster. And there are a few different versions of Jensen who are on the field at once. What you would like to do is you would like to select one and keep them separate from the others, perhaps using this tool here to mark them with any sort of symbol to indicate that they are not actually part of the encounter. At which point you would add their initiative and use them as a tracker for the entire group of enemies. The initiative is a very simple tool once you start to learn it, but it does have a few intricacies that you would need to learn later. That has covered every sort of bit of the basics you need to know about this area, as these two tools down here aren't really strictly necessary. This tool is more useful for advanced GMs, And as a GM who has DM'd over Roll20 for a while now, I have personally never seen the need to use this, as most other tools are already pre-existing and available for you. This is the help section where you may access helpful documents, access shortcuts and references, or report a bug. This is everything you need to know about this entire area of the toolbar. Do you have any questions?
I think one about the initiative tracker is if you could just go over once again how you accessed the menu, not to bring up the turn order, but rather to decide how it's
Yes,
decided when you put it as descending number order.
of course. In order to access this part of the initiative tracker, you'd want to click on the blue gear token down here. This allows you to set it up by pulling out this menu. This menu allows you to sort options, and you may access them by changing their numerical order from descending or ascending. You may access them alphabetically, A to Z, or you may sort of keep it miscellaneous. Now, in order to add sort of a custom label, you would write, let's say, initiative tracker. This would allow for you to change the sort of additional things that you wanted to have. So here I have added a custom that is just initiative tracker. You could use this to hold on to it. You could use this to just kind of label the entire thing, or you could just simply leave it. Thank you. Now, another fun point of accessing the turn order is that you may now remove all turns and clear the list. Clear. And suddenly you have a perfectly clean and reusable turn order. It should also be added that this turn order allows for you to interact with tokens in a very unique way. And I will add this primarily because this is an advanced use, which might come in handy. Let's go back to using the, let's remove the turn order 2 for now. And let's also reset the fog of war so that way, everybody can sort of keep it dark, keep it the way it's supposed to be. Let's grab Lorelei once again. Let's have one Lorelei who's on the base layer, which is the objects token layer. Let's put one on, not the map layer, but let's put one on the GM layer as well. Something fun that you can do is you can have an initiative tracker. You may click on the token needed for the Lorelei, the player, add a turn for that, and then you may move on to the GM layer and give the hidden Lorelei a turn. Additionally, while the GM might see this turn, to your players it will be invisible. This allows you to have hidden creatures have their own sort of initiative, and for you to reveal them when you change their layer to the base layer. I hope that covers all existing questions.
That works. Yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Now we move on to this area over here. We will cover the chat log first, since this is where a lot of your rolling will happen. So here we see a list of logs from various people who have been talking in the chat, and I will be showing you how to, yes, hello, Brant. I will be showing you how to roll dice. Roll20 is very simple, but also you need to make sure you remember how to use it properly. In order to roll a dice, you must hit the / and then type in roll 1d20. And then press enter, which will allow you to roll a dice. It seems that Brant has beaten me in this round. Hopefully this does not continue. Oh, Patrick has won even further. Now, moving on, you may roll any kind of dice. For example, you may roll a d4. You may roll a d6. You may roll a d8. And you may roll a d10. All of these are typical dice which you would want to use for such a purpose of playing D&D. Yes, you may also roll non-standard die, which, depending on what you may want to do, maybe you'll have a D17 in the game. Maybe you'll have a D4. Maybe you'll have a D3. Maybe you'll even choose to have a coin flip and have it be a D2. It all depends on what you choose to use as your mechanism for controlling the game. Additionally, you may change your label. As you can see down here, I am currently listed as Ryan WC, GM. By clicking on this selection here, I may change to be labeled as any person within this area. And this can be very helpful for remembering who is recorded as saying what. For example, I have changed myself to Nick, which now changes my entire icon, and now I may type and say, hello. However, instead of being the GM Ryan, which I was before, I am now labeled as Nick. However, all of the sections which you type yourself will always be highlighted in blue for easy reference. Next, we will be covering an important piece of Roll20 etiquette, which is to say that when your DM is talking about something and you want to talk with another player, you will usually talk with them in this sidebar in order to keep it unobstructive to the game. Additionally, if you wanted to, per se, have some secret nefarious action going on in the background and you wanted to message only one person out of all of them, you may either do your message over Discord, or you may click /W, which allows you to whisper something, space, and you may do GM, which would allow you to send a whisper directly to the GM, or you may select yes, hello, Brant. Additionally, you may do this with other players. For example, if I did it with this, I'd be able to message Brant and say hello, not hello, hello, back. No one else but us two are able to see those two messages. The whisper tool is a often underutilized but very helpful tool nonetheless. This basically covers most of the things you would want to know about the chat log. However, it should be stated that you may scroll up or down to look around. Also, when you first roll into Roll20, you will see that you will receive this message, which is a welcome to Roll20, which will provide you with many different examples of how you can roll things. So there is always a quick and easy access when you first log in. I should also add that when you are rolling dice, you may also roll with a 1d20, and let's say your character's like rolling strength, you may add 5, and it will roll 1d20 plus 5, and it will just calculate it for you. Easy math. Now, this is more of a useful tool for DMs because we are going to be going over the art library next. Yes, like this. Now, let's go to the art library. This is more useful for DMs as players will not often have access to the art library. Once you click on this, you will have access to premium assets or your library. Now, this is something that this is a Roll20 sort of campaign, which I have not done a lot of work in. So if I were to click on my library, it would have a lot of stuff that I've worked on from my other campaigns. However, if I wanted to add something, I would click the upload option, I would choose a file, and then I would select something like this fine elven man here. I would click open. You would have to give it a minute because Roll20 often does take some time to load, and all of a sudden this person is now available. You may do this with tokens, you may do this with maps, you may do this with anything you so desire, as long as it is a image file. Yes, advantage and disadvantage are also very easy. All you need to do is, do the classic of roll 2d20, and this KH means keep the higher one, whereas KL1 means keep the lower one. Very useful. Though hopefully you'll be rolling with KH1 more often than KHL or KL1. So now we move on from this images section and we will cover the journals. The journals are a very excellent resource because they cover what your players can see. In order to edit the journals, you will often want to use this tool up here, which will allow you to add many things. For example, if you were to click the add button, it would give you the option of adding a character, a handout, or a folder. A character would allow you to upload an image or a text file based on a character. A handout would be typically a piece of text that the players receive or some sort of information about how the game is played. Whereas a folder is a very handy tool that's meant to organize things. For now, we'll click on the folder. It would ask me to name a folder. I will type in example. Now there exists an example folder. Now, by clicking on the example folder with a right click, it'll allow me to either add a subfolder, add a character, add a handout, sort it from A to Z, rename the folder, or delete the folder. For now, let's add a character. We have Ali Buka right here. By clicking on this character, we see that we have the bio and info, character sheet, and attributes and abilities. By clicking the edit button, we receive the option to upload an image. For example, I will put the image of this fine elven gentleman right here. We now have Ali Buka. He now exists here. I may now click his token and drag it out, and now he will appear here. Let's say that Ali Buka is a wizard. So he has 6 hit points and 13 AC. This area here will function as a health bar, and this will be an AC tracker. Suddenly we see that his token has a health bar, and when you click on it, it will have his health here and his AC right there. Now, if we were to open up the Ali Buka sheet again and press edit again, we would see that there is an option here that says default token. This is an optional choice. However, it allows you to move a modified token on and off the screen at any one time. For example, right now, I have this token here selected. If I were to click this, it would fill with this image, and I'd be able to close this and close out of it again. And now when I drag him onto the screen, all of the data about his health and his AC is saved. This allows for you to have quick and easy access to your characters. Let's say you're entering a new map and you want to drag them out. However, Ali Buka is a player character, but right now, as a DM, I'm the only person who has access to him. So now you'd have to click the edit button, and we'd have to have it be both in the player's journals, which you can select to pre-existing players only, or you may send it to all players. Additionally, you would want to have it be edited and controlled by all players, or just the one specific player who can control it. By doing this, you allow for other players who are opening their Roll20s to both see this character and this folder, but you're also letting them edit this bio and info sheet and everything else on here, as well as control the token when you move it onto the map. You will see a little blue dot that will often appear to indicate what is kept visible and what is kept invisible. Now let's add a handout, and you will see that typically you will want to either have a name for this handout. We'll just call this Note 1. We'll keep this in. Let's just send this directly to. Let's send this directly to Patrick. This will be a secret message to him, and it'll only be able to be edited by me, because this is not something I want him to edit. And I will say, hello, how are you? I would then click the Save Changes button, and suddenly this note will exist. It will have a different color token, a little different color dip, and most importantly, this dip or this color will match the color of the player's color in their small toolbar from before. Additionally, you may add GM notes to your handouts and to your character sheets that will just be useful for taking character notes. These are notes which you can see, but the other players cannot. This is very useful on people like Ali Buka, because I could write down that he is a cool dude. Now, the players would have no info about him because there's nothing on his bio and info section. But I, as the GM, know that he is a cool dude, and I'd have to somehow portray that. Moving on from this example, we're also able to create subfolders, which could be useful for labeling allies, enemies, and things of that nature. Additionally, let's say we open up Ali Buka again, we will explore the second tab, which is the character sheet. We will click on this, and we'll receive the ability to edit a character sheet based off of the regular D&D model. Basically, up here we see the name of all the stuff. Hover over one.
We're losing you, Ryan.
1 second.
Side note, you can add an image that you already have uploaded to your library by going to the recent upload section, opening up the character, clicking the edit button, and dragging the image from there into the avatar section.
So, moving on to the character sheet portion of Alibuka, we see that it functions basically as the predominant character sheet for all D&D players. However, you will notice that whenever I move my cursor over one of these sort of labels, it turns red. This means that I may click on this, and it will roll a strength saving throw, and it will roll the dice for me. Additionally, you'll notice that by clicking on this area, I may modify it, so that way, let's say Alibuka is particularly strong. He has a strength of 12. Once I hit enter, all of the numbers change. The modifier is now 1, the saving throw is now 1, the athletics modifier is now 1. You can change and modify all of your stats in this way. By clicking on these boxes, I may indicate that he is proficient in athletics and that he is proficient in strength. This allows for me to easily modify his stats and his character sheet and his skills. However, his proficiency bonus is 2, as shown by the level indicator up here, which states that he is a level 1 character. This could change if I make him a level 5 character, then his proficiency bonus changes to 3. This is going to be the tool which you use to indicate his level. Let's put him back at level 1. He's not that advanced yet. Now, over in this top corner, you will see a gear. This gear allows you to edit the entirety of the character sheet in all of its totality. It's very intimidating to look at all these boxes. However, you must remember that it is not as intimidating as it appears. For example, most of the time you will see that there are custom modifiers that you can include. For example, let's say you have an item that increases your wisdom by 2, then you may put a +2 to your wisdom here. However, one of the most important things that you would want to do is select the auto damage roll, which will allow it so that when you roll damage with an attack or roll to attack, it will roll damage automatically, so you only have to click one button. Additionally, let's use a custom class. Let's say that he is a villager, and his hit die is a D8. He has no spellcasting ability, he has no spell slots, but for the sake of referencing, you may select any of these as his spellcasting modifier, and you may select any of these as his casting ability. One of the few downsides is that there is unfortunately no special warlock selection, so you will have to keep track of your warlock spell slots, all 1 or 2 of them yourself. It shouldn't be too hard. Moving on, you may select that he is proficient in intelligence saves. He's particularly smart. Now, you are also able to scroll around and look for the warlock option yourself. This is entirely up to you to choose to do so. Now, for all of you particularly sneaky rogues out there, you would want to have your first level ability, which is having expertise in a skill. In order to do this, you would want to observe the sort of selection ability as a either normal, and you can modify it to expertise. This way, when you finish modifying the sheet and you finish clicking on the gear, you go back to the core character sheet. When you select acrobatics, you will automatically be able to have expertise in it. This is a small 2-step process. Continuing onward, this is where you write down your equipment. Very simple. He has a note book. That is all. Apparently, a notebook has been changed to a big fucking sword. Good for him. Now, we will move on to proficiencies. This is a useful area where you can keep track of what proficiencies and skills you have. This area down here will be used for languages. You may select either language, weapon, armor, or other. You may type in language, and let's say he knows common, at which point this will be selected. You may then click on this, and it will show that he has language proficiency in common. Additionally, you may click on tools. Now, let's say he has woodcarver's tools. And he is proficient in them, which can be changed from jack of all trades to expertise to proficient, but he's just proficient. You may then select the ability he uses with it, click on that, And now, when we click on this, it will automatically roll for a woodcarver's check. Wow, what a lucky guy. Moving on from the tool section, we may now move on to the attacks and spellcasting section. Let's open it up. Let's say he has a... Let's write down that he has this big sword. Big sword. Now this is obviously an attack roll, which utilizes his strength modifier, which you have set as 12. So we utilize his strength, but you could also set it so that way it utilizes any other stat, but we'll keep it at strength. He is proficient, and let's say it's a +1 weapon, so it has an additional +1 modifier. Now, we of course don't have to type anything in for range, because it doesn't really have a range that is beyond melee. However, we may also include that it has a, let's say it has no really magic bonus, and it has a crit range of 20. Let's say it deals 1d10 plus strength, +1, we did say it was a +1 weapon. And now we would have to go to the type of damage it deals, and it would deal slashing damage. We have now completed this weapon. So now when I click on the big sword, it will roll to attack. Wow, this guy is a really high roller. Now, this area up here is where you can simply type down your personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, and some of the other things that your character does not want to bother of customizing on the. This area is with your class resources. This is. I see. I am returned. All right, got it. 3, 2, 1, go. So moving on to the personality traits and ideal section, you may type in whatever you like here. Additionally, you may click on this gear and remove the lines. This way, you may indicate that you do not want to edit those sections right now, and it will just leave it so you can edit it later. Now, class resources are dealing with things like your fighter's action surge or your martial dice. It will also deal with your arcane recovery and things along those lines. You would want to type in what your resource is. Let's call it action surge. And he has 1 use out of a total of 1 use. You may then click on the arrow to indicate that he is no longer able to use action surge. This is an excellent way of keeping track of how many abilities you have used and when. Yeah, he has 27 cool points. Cool dude. Moving up here, this is where you will type in how fast your character can move, as you would on a normal character sheet. Let's say that he's a fast fellow, so he's got not 305, he's got 35 speed. And this is where you type in your armor class, which you can edit to be pretty much anything you want it to be. Let's say he's got 18, or more accurately, because he's not wearing any armor, he has 10. Hit points are just heavily customizable, but he has 6, as we have established. He has a hit die of a d8. You may set it that he's got 1, and when you click on this, it will roll a hit dice for when you're recovering on a short rest. Now down here is where we move on to areas that affect your character's abilities directly. This will be where your class features, racial features, and your background abilities go, which is why you will click on this plus symbol. You will state the name of the feature. You will state its source, which is either a race feature, a class feature, a regular feat, or a background feat. You may also select other if it doesn't apply. Let's say that this is a background feature, and his background, which is his source, is that he's a cool dude. And the ability's name is Cool Guy. You may then type in what the ability does. And after doing such, you would click on this gear, and now the ability exists. You may then click on this speech token, and once you do such, it will appear down here. This is essentially a very helpful tool to decide and to keep track of your character's abilities, and also to allow your DM to see what your character is capable of. This character sheet area is particularly something that the DM should allow for players to control themselves, as it will give them the responsibility of managing their character. It also has the classic bio section, which is pretty much entirely typable for the players. And then we move on to the spell section, where we would add spells based off of different things. For example, let's go under cantrips. Let's say he has the Firebolt cantrip. Since he is an elf, and he should be having one of those. Now we have Firebolt here. It is a School of Evocation. It has a casting time of 1 action. It is a range of 120 feet. And it's a single target. So single target. It has no material components. It's not concentration. It is instant. And its spellcasting ability is Intelligence. Basically, this is where you'd set up all of the information about a spell that you'd need to know. Additionally, when you're choosing the output, which is what is going to appear in the text chat, you may select a spell card for a effect. For example, let's just say it just sets something on fire. You would just write that it sets something on fire. But for Firebolt, we would want to select an attack. So we would choose that this is a ranged spell attack, and it deals 1d10 damage of the type of fire. Additionally, for those of you who are playing classes which allow you to add your ability modifiers, you may click Add Ability Modifier or None. Additionally, if you wanted to make use of your level feature, you may want to select your cantrip progression as either Cantrip Dice, which is going to be for most of them, or Cantrip Beam for Eldritch Blast and Eldritch Blast alone, because that's the favorite cantrip of all D&D players. This is where you'd want to go if you wanted to have a saving throw. Other than that, and this is more this area here for higher level casting is much more useful for actual upper level spells, since it will allow you to add, let's say, 1d10 damage at a higher level spell. You may also set it so that there is a small description of what happens for your attack. However, for the purposes of this, we do not need it. And down here, if you really choose to, you may write down that this is a wizard spell and that this is an evocation spell, but you would then click Done. Moving on from that, you get this entire area, which would describe the spell to you. Then you could click on this information icon here, the eye, which would minimize it. Then hovering your cursor over the Firebolt area, you would click it. You would want to cast it at the 0th level, and you could submit it. That is a 12 to hit and 4 fire damage. And I see that Brant has rolled a 21 on an accurate shot. Moving back to the main page, yes, cantrips don't really need higher level casting. That's more of an example of what you would want to do for a spell of a higher level. For example, moving on to the next part of this character sheet, we will move on to this area up here. As some of you may have already noticed, there is a red highlighted section that states normal. This means that all of your rolls will be made normally, with a single roll to decide the outcome. You may select disadvantage, which would allow you to roll a skill and keep the lower one. You may also select advantage, and therefore it would keep the higher one. However, in most cases, you're going to want to keep it at normal. And of course, you are always left with the option of manually typing in your rolls as well. This is simply a means of rolling things faster, which is entirely up to you as a player or a DM to decide to do. Now, moving on from this character sheet, I have showed you how to build a character, how to add notes, how to add folders, and how to add subfolders. Are there any questions? Silence you. Silence you, fiend.
Aside from such evil thoughts that Brant puts forward, there is a question to ask, specifically on the character sheets themselves. If you could open that back up.
Of course.
This is more about the spells, first of all. If you
Right.
could go over, just for everyone to know, adding the DCs and
Of course.
ability, along with spell slots and how many spell slots you have left to cast from.
Understood. So I will now show you how to do a saving throw thing. Let's call this one Sacred Flame. This is another evocation to show you how to do a saving throw spell. We want to type in all the regular details about the others, which I will skip for now to move on to the important bits, which we have no real need to. We'll move on to the attack section. Now, in this case, for spell attack, you would write none. You would keep it at none, even if it is a ranged attack, because you do not need to roll a ranged attack dice. You do not need to roll a 1d20. You would simply write down that it deals 1d radiant damage. You would keep the cantrip progression at normal. However, you would include a saving throw effect. The saving throw effect would most likely use a strength saving throw or a dex saving throw, and the effect is no damage. In order for this to be more effective, we'd have to choose a spellcasting ability, which we will make intelligence, correcting that. Additionally, if we wanted to make it so this character used only intelligence, we may go up to the spellcasting ability and select intelligence, which will set our spell DC at 10 and our spell attack bonus to 2. Doing such allows us to maintain the sheet as is. We would click Done, close up the information bar, and now I will leave it in chat as Sacred Flame attack. DC 10, otherwise no damage, dexterity saving throw, and if they fail, they would take 3 radiant damage. Now, once again, in order to add spell slots, you would go into the gear. This would allow you to edit the sheet, and this would also allow you to add spell slot modifiers, or let's say that you want to go over your spell slots as a whole. Let's say you are a full caster. By doing such, you would edit your spell sheet, and it would now show that you have 2 maximum spell slots. In order to show that you have 2 spell slots out of 2 spell slots, you would increase the number to 2, and then you'd be able to count down to 0. Are there any other questions?
I think one other thing that should be gone over is how in Roll20 leveling up does work. For example, level 1 to 2, how does the system
Of
handle
course.
that? And is there any way to automate leveling up?
It is entirely manual. For example, let's say that Ali got to level 2. We would edit him. It would show that he went from level 1 to level 2. However, because he is already listed as a full caster, when we jump over to spells, he would now have 3 spell slots. You would have to input your spells manually. However, this is sort of the most automated function you can have. His spell slots, as well as his proficiency modifier when he gets to certain levels, would also increase. However, it isn't up to you to edit everything else.
All right. I think that's it for questions on the character sheet then.
All right. In that case, we will move on from the character sheet, and we will cover this section, the Compendium. The Compendium allows you to access very quick tidbits of information about various aspects of the game you're playing. For example, we have rules, we have races, proficiencies, all sorts of other things. This is sort of where you'd find your quick access to very simple things. For example, you click on spells, and it would show you all sorts of spells in alphabetical order, and then you could then type in the name of a spell to look it up. Ah, yes, the NPC option. Moving back to the character sheet, as we do need to go over the NPC option, we may then click on this, which is a small circle that states NPC. This changes the entire character sheet to that of a monster sheet, which you would then use to modify it very explicitly. This allows you to add things like features and to format it like this. This is typically how you organize monsters instead of characters, as well as giving them skills, vulnerabilities, resistances, immunities, and all the like. Now, moving away from the NPC options, we go back to the information table where it shows all of this information that we would like to have. In order to refresh it, you would simply close this out and then go back to the origin. This is where you will be able to access all of the tidbits of information which may or may not be useful to you. Moving on from this section, we move to the Jukebox. The Jukebox is a sort of optional aspect that you could use to add playlists. You could use it for background music. However, the usage of bots through Discord oftentimes will nullify the need for the Jukebox. And in using the Jukebox, you may find that it would cause overlay issues and volume syncing problems. So use this carefully at your own discretion. Next, we will cover the collection. The collection allows you to add macros. For example, we have playing cards here that could be put onto the screen. However, you may also add different sorts of rollable tables. For rollable tables, I would recommend looking elsewhere, as rollable tables are somewhat unnecessary for most characters. But essentially, this would allow for you to have a token that has multiple faces. For example, we have a new rollable table. Let's click on the option. Then we would see, let's call this Alley Faces. Once we have this all set up, we would click Add Item, at which point we would have Alley, our handsome elf from before. Save changes. We have Alley. Add.
We're losing you.
We have Alley.
Yeah, we can't hear you right.
Really? My audio is, according to this, my audio is fine.
Yeah, no, we couldn't hear you for for a good like 10 seconds there.
Oh, I see. What was the last thing you heard?
You just opened this edit table item thing, so
I
just
see.
go to the start of that.
All right. In that case, I'll very quickly delete this. We'll rewind a bit. And we'll move on. All right. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Onto the rollable table option, we will click Add. We have a new table. Click on the new table. We shall call this Alley. Alley's faces. Since, we've been working with Alley for a little bit now. We will now click the Add Item option. We will call this Alley's Face 1. Now, in order to best use this tool, you'd want for us to go to the art library, where we have a picture of Alley saved. We will then move this into sort of dragging motion, and we will now put this here. So now we have Alley here. As you can see, Brant has also added a second image from his end by clicking the Add Item, by clicking again, and doing the same process. Now in doing so, we have Alley, who is our friendly elf, and we have Alley, who is some scary creature. We may now press the Save Changes option, go back to our table. When we have Alley's faces, the one which we have created, we will click on Token, and this will cause a picture to appear on the screen. You must be very careful to make sure that you do not lose it. Now, once you have this token, and I right-click on it, you will see that it has an extra option under Layers, which is multi-sided. This allows you to randomly choose which side it is on, or to choose the side. In order to change the face, you may press Choose Side, and this functions as a clicker bar. So, since there's only two, we have one at the far right, or the far left, and then we have one at the far right. And in choosing this side, we now have Alley's face like this, as a horrible monster wolf man. Nonetheless, Alley is not a horrible monster wolf man, so we'll get rid of this token for a little bit. Now we will move on to the last section, which is My Settings. This allows you to adjust various technical aspects of your Roll20. For example, you could change your display name from, let's say, Ryan. Let's say I'm Alley. I'll hold on to this. I'll press Save Name. And now if we look across the screen, so the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that I have gone from Ryan to Alley. This could be useful for remembering character names and all the like, or it could just be a way of, typing out your name instead of just Schmucker, the one who watches. However, you will have to press save name in order to deal with this. Now, moving on, this area is for adjusting your music level. For example, if your DM does decide to use Jukebox, then this is where you would control your own personal volume of the music by sliding this bar up or down. Now, this is an area where you could choose to, you're generally going to want to leave all of these sets on, since they're very useful. However, if you wanted to, you could enable 3D dice, which just really allows you to see things. For example, I've enabled 3D dice, and now I'm going to select to roll 1d20. And now we will see it. There it goes. 2. Not very lucky for me. So I think I'm going to turn that off, since that is not my favorite thing to do, but there you see other people using it. Now, most of these options you're going to want to leave as is, as they are very, very, they're useful, and they're left in the settings that are most beneficial to the player. However, if you scroll down, you'll be able to modify some game settings. For example, one of the most perhaps important to modify in a group that has a large game is the player avatar size. What that is mostly talking about the images which we have in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Selecting this will allow us to set it from regular to large, making them all bigger, letting us have an excellent view of Palpatine's terrible, terrible teeth. And then we can move it to small, in case you want to have the images still there in the corner. Or if you wanted it to be the smallest it can be, just set it to names and you'll see them all there. But it will leave important information like your name, as well as the color that you have chosen for yourself. With that, we have covered the entirety of this section up here. Are there any questions?
I believe that was quite thoroughly covered in terms of that. I think one distinction that should be made is specifically adding music into the jukebox, and if it's possible to set a playlist for it.
I see. Moving into the jukebox, we may now select an add new empty playlist. Let's call this Happy Song. All right.
Oh, hold on.
Let me know when it clears up. Moving back to the playlists, we have Happy Songs. Select OK. We now have this playlist. Now, in order to edit this, we would want to either select the play button, the shuffle button, or the export my audio playlist. Click on this, you'll be able to edit things and add different playlists. For example, the jukebox will do all the things stated above. Additionally, you would be able to sort tracks from A to Z. This allows you to very easily manage your audio and cover everything you need to do in the music section. And that should cover the music section.
All right. I think that's it then. Another question though about the tables is, are tables a GM only feature in terms of editing them? And if not, is it possible in the same way you could earlier with the journal section select specific players, be able to edit tables?
Essentially, tables are mostly available to GMs. However, if you wanted to, let's say that we wanted to change alley so that way the players could control the table that they were resting on. We would move back. We have the rollable table alley here that has multi-sided. We would choose the side. It could be the scary wolf, or it could be our friendly fellow. Then we would move into the journals. We'd select the character sheet. We'd move back to the bio and info. We would then select edit. And similar to how before we had labeled his token as just a regular one, with the health bars included, we would then unselect it by removing it. We would click on the rollable table. We would select it here. And by saving those changes, we would then be able to drag out another version of him that would also have the rollable table function, which players would be able to control. which is very useful for allowing them to have multiple sort of designs for their one character.
Okay, and another question coming from Rockdom is dragging spells or to where they can go. For example, monsters on the map and spells into your character sheet. If you could show how that works.
Of course. Let us go back to the collection, or I suppose the compendium is much easier. Let us open the monsters table. Let's say we wanted to have an adult bronze dragon appear to terrify the people of this town. We would click on it, drag it out, have it here. We have all the lists of its traits, abilities, everything that we would need for it. And it would be able to very easily be useful for our purposes. We have character sheet, bio and info, everything we would need. However, one of the few downsides is that it would come out as a sort of blank file, which can be solved eventually later. Now, if we wanted to talk about dragging spells into your character sheet, you would want to click on your character, go to your character sheet, or better yet, you'd want to, who is messing with this? Unselect the NPC option, go into spells. Yes. We have the monsters here. We now have this adult bronze dragon here. And we may now edit it and put in our own token if we so choose to. This way, when we drag out the monster onto the screen, it is up to us to get it. However, going into the compendium is a very quick and easy way to acquire the stats of any monster that exists within D&D 5e. Now, in terms of using spells, we would want to move into the compendium. I misclick. Let's go over spells. You click on spells. Let's say that this character has Acid Splash. We would click on Acid Splash. We have this here, an excellent usage. Go to the grab Acid Splash, drag it onto the character sheet, accepting drop from compendium, click here, and suddenly we have it here. This allows for us to instantly have a complete version of an existing spell, and in effect, while I showed you earlier how to do it custom, you now know how to do it immediately. This is also a means of streamlining your ability to edit it. Are there any other questions?
I believe that should be all. Rockdom is just mentioning, though, that you can drag other items such as tools and proficiencies from the
Yes.
compendium into your sheet.
Moving back, all of these sorts of things can be added based off of the information which you need, usually via dragging things onto your character sheet directly, including equipment. Next, we will be covering the usage of different maps. In order to change the map which you are on, you will want to go to the top right-hand corner of your proper screen, ignoring the area over here, that has the page toolbar. You would click on this to open different pages. Right now, we're on a map labeled Town, and in order to go to a different map, we would simply click on it. Now we are on a sewer map that is filled with a lot of enemies. However, if you open the toolbar again, you will see that there is a small ribbon that is labeled Players. This indicates where your players will be, but not where you are. In order to change what map the players are looking at, you'd have to click on this ribbon and then drag it to the next map which you want to use. Clicking on it allows for the players to then be on the map which you are on. This is useful since the DM could be on a different map while the players are doing things on another map. But let's move the players back to town because that's where they'd like to stay. In order to create a new map, you would go to the Create New Page option. at which point you would click on it. A new untitled option would appear. We will call this field, labeling it. And additionally, if we wanted to edit its size, we could go to page settings. Under page settings, we cover the sort of grid. For example, right now it is set to be 25 squares by 25 squares. The background is set to be white, which is desirable. We have it set so that way each square is 5 feet, which is typical for the D&D sort of grid system. We have the grid enabled, so players will be able to see the grid. We have the color of the grid set to be a sort of light gray, so that way they can see it. And we have the opacity also set up. Additionally, from this area, we can also set up the fog of war, should we choose to. Now we may click on this new page, and we see that we have a small but empty map. This is where we would use our knowledge, which we had acquired previously, about layers to work with the Map and Backgrounds tool. This allows us to make a background. Let's say there is a background of here we are. Yes. You may now then put this in the corner. You may edit it and drag it out. And suddenly we have a larger map. Then, via changing your layer to objects and tokens, we can move into our journal and drag out a player. This player can now move around on the map as they please without worrying about dragging the map along with them through a misclick. A very useful usage of the map. Now, in order to create a new map token, the thing which you would like to do is go into your images and upload any file from your, which would be a good back. Done using any sort of creation tool which you already possess, or you could even just go online and look up a D&D grid map of a warehouse or a field or an adventure guild or any sort of thing like that. At which point you would save it to your computer, click the upload button, choose a file from your computer, and select it from any list of images you already possess. This pretty much covers the entirety of the map making tools which you would like to use. However, it should be stated that you can make your maps a little bit bigger by modifying the width and the height to make it 27 by 27, which will cause it to expand out towards the left and downwards. Usually doing this will allow you to either resize your map to make it bigger, or resize your map to make it smaller, or wider, or longer. However, this gives you great freedom to change your desired map to any shape you choose. However, for now, we will focus on making sure that we keep the standard 25 by 25, since they are the most useful for battle maps. After all, although this might be only 25 by 25, via our ruler tool, we can tell that this battlefield is actually 120 feet long. This covers most of the information we need to know about Roll20 in order to use it effectively. However, for DMs and players who want to make their own tokens, there are extra tools which can be used in order to better create tokens to suit your desires. But before we move on to this, how about we move on to questions?
Like Rakta mentioned in chat, any keyboard shortcuts that are potentially useful, like for example here, pressing X for prior movement on tokens and whatnot?
Yeah.
Anything that a player or GM might need to know to help make their lives easier, which is some simple
Yes.
keyboard clicks.
Let's say you wanted to move a token towards, let's say this is an enemy, and this is your character. If you click on this token and hold down, you'll be able to send out a little pulse of your color to indicate where to drag, keep your attention. Or you would click on it and then right click and then move your screen up or down. Additionally, you may click on this and then hold down both of these to move your character. Now let's say you wanted to move your character towards the enemy. You would then move in a small grid like this, or you may click on it to indicate your name, Ali, show name, and suddenly you can have a little name for your token. However, if we were to click on this and press Control Z, he would move back to the position he started in, and move back a few positions. However, you want to be careful not to hold it down, or you'll keep going back. So just Control Z once, and he slides back into place like nothing ever happened. It is a very good way to sort of move back if you want to take back a move before you commit to it.
Okay. I think for the information we just went over, that's all good. Yeah, I think we can. Oh, we do have some things from Brant though, before we move on.
Yes. Please proceed.
Let's put myself in normal audio. There we go. Okay, so first things first. One of the things in the character sheet that mentioned was multiclassing, which is actually very, very easy on Roll20. Aside from actually manually adding in all of the features and things, in the settings option, the same place where we were setting our custom class, there are second, third, and fourth classes, which just let you set a second, third, or fourth class in the 5e roster. Additionally, on these tokens on the screen, sometimes you've been seeing us probably pop up, open them, edit certain things about them. To get to this screen, you can double-click the token, and it'll show you the character it represents, the name, and the values of the various bars and the auras. For the players of your campaign, this will be greatly reduced. It won't have the represents character, one of the GM notes, and it won't have these little bars next to it. However, these little bars next to it are very, very useful, because you can use these to set them to character variables. Like, the Kobold Cultist is already an established character. He already has a character sheet, he has an AC, and he has some health. Through this screen, we can click on this drop-down menu, and then scroll down to whatever we want to set it to. So in this case, we probably want the blue bar to be AC, so it has a 14 there now, and the red one to be HP. Also in this drop-down menu, you can just begin to type, and you get the intended variable. Now, if we click Save, and go back to our little Kobold Cultist, he has a bar that has 13 out of 13, and his blue bubble has 14 inside of it. Let's see what else was there. Additionally, if you have a character sheet open like this, and you want to just kind of keep them around on your screen, but you don't want them to clutter everything up, what you can do is you can double-click the name of the character. What it'll do is it'll produce this tiny little, like, transparent square that'll have the character's name and nothing else on it. So it's not really obstructing your screen, you can just move it around. To get them out of this format, all you have to do is double-click them again, and they are maximized again. That is all I wanted to cover. Any questions?
I think that was all good. One more thing that is being covered, though, by Rockdom in chat is the top right in the gear section in the settings.
Yes.
Something that you can do as a GM is you can click rejoin as player in order to have that view, like if you're editing a map or making tokens, just to make sure that what you want your players to see is exactly what they're seeing, since you'll be able to see exactly like they do. Other than that, I believe we can move on to resources that GMs can use and players as well for token creation and whatnot.
Excellent. Now, moving towards the most easily available source for token making, we will enter a new tab, and we will call this Token Maker 5e. You'll find it by just looking up that. And then you'll see Token Stamp 2 on the Roll Advantage. By clicking on this, it will show you that you can make any token of your desire. The best way to use this small editing tool is by clicking on this. This small circle up here shows you how you can edit the border. You can make it a regular border, a thick border, a thin border, square, thick square, colored, sort of metallic, and you can change the shape. By clicking on this again, you close that screen. Now, if you wanted to modify the border color, you would click on the border tint. This allows you to change it between all of these bars. And you could also click on the gradient to move this around to any color of your choosing. Now, for the background color, this covers what your character would be in the background. For example, let's keep it white, or keep it dark black.
Could you repeat the background color part again? You lagged heavily when you started.
I see. The background color is oftentimes unimportant, since you will likely be using an image that has a pre-existing background. However, if you do have a clear image, you may use this to change the gradient that exists behind your border token. Now, in order to better utilize this, in order to choose an image, you'd have to drop an image there to really start manipulating it. So we move over to this section down here, and we click on Choose Image. This allows us to pick any image of our choosing. Let's say I wanted to make a token of a non-existing character. Let's start with these groups. Now, from this, I would either increase the size, change its orientation, increase size again, and now I have a pretty good image of this this robotic fellow right here. From there, if I am satisfied with this image, I would click the upload button. Upon clicking the upload button, it would open a new tab and now has this image, at which point you would right click on it and save image to your computer. Then by saving that image to your computer, you would go back to the Roll20 screen and you'd set it up from there by going into images and uploading it. Or you could go into the character, you could add a character, and you can upload it directly from your computer. This is perhaps the easiest and fastest way to make a token, especially since you can just go online and look up any image or source of your choosing. Are there any questions?
No, token stamp 2 it's a pretty simple resource to use. I don't think there's much in terms of questions. One
Yes.
thing Rockdom did want you to go over though is downloading instead of uploading. Just downloads it onto your computer
Yes.
instead of uploading as a link.
True. So you might want to use the download button directly, or if you choose to, you may upload it so that way you may see what it would look like in the vacuum as sort of an image without anything else around it. Other than that, once you were done, you would click the clear workspace and suddenly the image is gone. If you decide that you're not particularly accepting of the border color, the border style, or the background color, all you need to do is refresh the page and it will go back to its normal base. Now there is one menacing man. Ultimately, that is probably the most useful tool in terms of token creation. We have already explained how you would want to go online and find maps and upload those into images in order to use those for maps. And depending on your own choice or DMing style, you can use those at your discretion. However, tokens are very useful for providing images and locations of where characters are. Are there any final questions?
I think that about covers everything we are looking for, unless you have any other recommendations for maybe if you use any sites specifically for character art or maps, maybe even map creation, if you'd like to plug them now.
Typically, you would want to use either images that you find directly online, because that has the widest availability. However, Patreon, simply using your own sort of tools, using your own drawings, is entirely possible. I would heavily recommend using Patreon and different sources of fan art from online mediums, most of which can be found over Google Images. Oftentimes, the most simple solution is sort of the best one. And Reddit does have quite a few D&D maps available for you to use.
I think that about covers what we need then, if you don't have anything else to plug in terms of questions. Everything seems very laid out and simple.
That's true. 5e.tools comes with a lot of art assets for D&D monsters as well, which can be very useful. However, that concludes most of our presentation for you all today. I hope this has been a learning experience for all of you. And if you have any further questions, refer to any part of the video for anything you might need. Have a good game.
Also, feel free to ask the board. We're always around. So.